Hello, hello. Welcome back. It's time for another episode of Leading Women in Tech. I'm your host, career bestie, leadership extraordinaire for your career. And today we're continuing our exploration of quiet leadership. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. But today I want to talk more about introversion. If you aren't comfortable with being in the limelight, that isn't a bad thing. In fact, it can be an amazing asset. Join me in this episode as I discuss how being a quiet, thoughtful leader boosts productivity, morale, and gives you informal influence, as well as embracing your natural introversion. You ready to dive in? Let's do this. I want you to start by understanding if you're an introvert or you're an extrovert. So many of us do not get this right. So let's start with what is an introvert. Everything I'm about to say is a generalization, right? Really remember, these are labels to help us understand each other. They are not a box to put yourself in. But if you're an introvert and identify with some of what I'm about to say, I want you to know you're fine. You're a superpower, in fact, by being an introvert. Similarly, if you're an extrovert and identify with some of this, don't be surprised. Humans are a complex continuum, and the introvert-extrovert labels help us understand each other, but they are limiting if you put yourself in a box. They are one thing that characterizes you, but they are not a limiting factor. So, introverts. Introverts is an overall preference for a minimally stimulating environment. What does that mean? Well, we gain energy and recharge in solitude rather than in social interactions. As I mentioned in a previous episode, a great example of this is how do you recharge after a long haul flight, particularly if you've got to keep yourself awake, right? You've done a long haul flight, you decided you need to stay awake for a few more hours rather than going straight to bed because you want to adjust your body clock. If you're an extrovert, you may well choose to go out and be around people. Being in a busy environment, even if it's just a coffee shop with people you don't know, gives you energy. The introvert does not do well in public. They do their best work away from the busy environment. They tend to be the ones who really struggle in the office, thrive in the work at home environment, or at least hybrid, which is one of the reasons why when managers and leaders say, we're all going to do this, return to the office, or we're all going to do this, work from home, it is focusing on the individual needs of that person making that decision rather than understanding that your team is many different personalities. Forcing everybody to operate the same way is a recipe for not making the most of your team. So while an introvert might not mind being in a meeting or meeting people, they need peace and quiet for deep thinking, recharging their batteries. When I was a little bit younger, I actually lost friends because of my introverted nature. I had a lot of extrovert friends because I'm quite a bubbly person, right? But they didn't understand why at the weekend I was just done. I'd been at work for the whole week. The last thing I wanted to do was be around more people. As much as I love my friends, it took more out of me. I needed to recharge. I had friends who just didn't understand that. And sadly, we parted ways because it's before I could explain. It wasn't about them. It was about that I needed time to myself to recharge. Fewer meetings for the introverts actually allows us to generate amazing ideas, which is what we were talking about briefly 2 episodes ago when we talked about quiet leadership. Being quiet also allows us to generate more ideas. If we are in fewer meetings, we're less stimulated, we're less stressed, and we come better prepared to the next conversation with insights and ideas that stand out. Small groups for the introvert tend to be more powerful, allowing us to really shine. Larger social groups or unfamiliar social settings are particularly draining, though many of us learn how to adapt and engage. I have. If you'd met me 20 years ago, I was the person who, if you met me in a small group, I was quite loud, quite vocal. Meet me in a big social event, I was the person in the corner hiding behind the glass of wine and the canapé. Don't talk to me. Even though I could have talked to one person apparently just as well as in a one-on-one setting when I was happy and comfortable. But just the volume of people was overwhelming and draining. Over the years, I've learned how to cope with this. I've learned phrases to help with social interaction. I've had to learn them. That doesn't make me wrong or bad. It's just I get so emotionally drained, I have to actively work at socializing. So if that resonates with you, I want you to know you're not alone. If you're listening to this and thinking, wow, those people are weird, that means you're probably an extrovert, and that's okay. But I want you to be a little bit more patient with those around us who perhaps don't do well in that situation. It doesn't make us less good or capable. It just means it's too much for us. Because even though I've learned to adapt and work well in social situations, it is hugely exhausting. It is hugely draining. I need so much more downtime to recover. And my ability to think clearly, honestly, is not as good in these situations. Another common element of introverts is our preference for depth over breadth. Now, not exclusively, again, a generalization here. But in general, we seek deep, meaningful conversations over small talk. So if you struggle with small talk, it might be a sign that you're an introvert. It doesn't mean you are, but just carry on listening because it might be there's this one element that you need to work on. And we tend to form very small number of close, long-lasting relationships. We have a large circle of acquaintances, but very few where we have this really deep relationship with, because it takes so much out of us to build that. So when we do it, we hold on to it for so much goodness, right? We're more focused on our inner thoughts and feelings rather than external stimuli. What does that mean? It means we spend more time in our own heads, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It allows profound insights and creativity. But it can also lead to burnout from overthinking, self-deliberation, having an excessive inner critic. We often engage in a lot of introspection and reflection, and we have no control, and we assume everybody else does. This can be a double-edged sword. It offers insights, opportunities for growth, but can massively impact self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And when it comes to communication, us introverts may well be more reserved, less likely to speak up in large groups. Not all of us. I certainly have no problem speaking up. But in a large group, I'm a little bit more cautious, shall we say. It's not always the same. I need to speak my mind. I think that's one of my personality traits. I cannot deal with people missing the obvious. I don't have a problem with people being stupid. I know people who say, I can't deal with stupidity. That's not my issue. I don't actually think most people are stupid, and I certainly do not think it's deliberate. And therefore, I think when people say I can't deal with stupidity, it is a level of arrogance, which gets under my skin, actually. But I will speak my mind. If I think we are going around in circles, or we're making a stupid decision as a group, I will say something. But the extreme introvert, and I include myself in this, even if they do speak up and express their mind, they need space, peace, quiet, me time to recharge. Me speaking up and speaking my mind costs me. I have to do it because I can't stand the alternative. The idea of us walking into this wall that I can see approaching and everybody else is ignoring is exhausting to me. But equally exhausting is that speaking up. So introverts often think before they speak and choose their words carefully. Again, not always. There are introverts, and I have done this at times, where we are thinking out loud. But again, on average, massive generalization, introverts value quality over quantity in communication. And as we discussed in episode 221, there is real power in saying less, having a reputation for every word coming out of your mouth being significant and profound. So what I would like to encourage you to do is lean into that tendency that goes hand in hand with the quiet leader we discussed last time, because that allows us to have more impact and therefore be taken more seriously. For me, it wasn't that I wasn't having impact, it was that I was externally processing. And those are two separate things. I was processing my ideas out loud because I was thinking so fast and I was doing it in a room of people. And so I needed to get it out because otherwise we were all going to make a big mistake. What I had to do was learn how to think on my feet and then talk the bit I needed to talk rather than externally processing, because I couldn't deal with all this external stimuli, which meant I spoke out loud. And that's something to watch out for as an introvert. If you find yourself speaking a lot, it might be because you're not having the space to internally process. You're externally processing in a room full of people who do not need you to externally process. In general, you don't externally process with certain people, certain groups. The higher up we go in an organization, the less external processing we can get away with doing. It's one of the reasons for having a coach. Externally process with your coach, right? Because your peers don't know what you're doing, your boss doesn't have time, your team, you can do a little bit of external processing with your team, but you have to be very cautious doing too much. Otherwise, they start seeing you as the person who doesn't know what they're doing. There is a way to do it well with your team, and there's a way to do it very badly with your team, right? So it's worth just paying attention to that. If you are an introvert that speaks a lot, is it that you're externally processing because you haven't got the space to internally process? And by space, I don't just mean not having lots of meetings. I mean having time outside of meetings to prepare for the meeting. When I started preparing for meetings, game changer. I think preparing for meetings is important for every single one of us. Obviously, the introverts need a bit more time because preparing for meetings for an introvert is also mindset. It's also bringing your energy so you have that to hold you through something that's very stimulating for you. The introverts prefer social interactions in one-on-one or small group settings. Our social interactions are powerful for us. I'm not saying we don't need or want social interactions. In fact, every human, I would say, should have social interactions. But we do enjoy socializing, but in certain ways, because big groups are very, very draining. Small groups are draining, but it's balanced with I'm getting social stuff from it. We get oxytocin. I think we get some serotonin as well. We're getting goodness into ourselves from it. And it can be very tempting as an introvert to avoid social interaction, especially the extreme introverts like myself, but we still need it. So it's crucial to find a balance between interacting with extroverted friends, which can be very draining if they don't understand you're an introvert, by the way. That's something I really wish I'd had more conversations about when I was younger. But you need your solitude to recharge, and the people around you need to understand that. At work, introverts thrive in environments that allow for independent work and deep concentration, which is why I think most people think introverts don't make good leaders, because leaders don't do independent work per se, right? But the thing is, actually, great leaders do. We need to be strategic. The introverts prefer research tasks, analysis, problem solving. That's strategy, right? And the further you up you go, basically once you're above director, your job is strategic. At director level, your job is alignment with strategy. So you need a lot of deep thinking and problem solving. Higher up, it's more and more strategy. The proportion of strategy in your work goes up, less tactical. I would say introverts excel in these roles because they have that space, that capacity for being on their own to solve problems. There are exceptions. Some introverts excel in roles that involve social interactions, such as sales, by ensuring they have well-protected alone time to prepare. I've known some great introverted sales leaders. They were so thoughtful. They were so good at it. Being a great leader and an introvert can and should go hand in hand. Use non-social time to make interactions more productive and less draining. But there are so many misconceptions about introversion. The first that I talked about briefly last time was being shy or socially anxious. Introverts can be very social and have strong interpersonal skills. This is why most people don't believe I'm an introvert. It is not a weakness. It comes with its own strengths. It doesn't mean you're shy. It just means you need to recharge. Equally, being shy does not make you an introvert. I know many shy extroverts, right? They need to be around people to fill themselves up. They love being the quiet person in the big room. I hate being the person in the big room, whether I'm quiet or loud. I hate it. It drains me so much. But I know people who love being the quiet person in the room because they fill themselves up from it. There is mixed messaging around how many executives are introverts. And I found, just doing some research after my throwaway comment in the last episode, I've double checked my numbers and I find this really fascinating. Firstly, the not so good news. 65% of executives believe introversion is a blocker to leadership, but 6% also believe introverts make better leaders. Interesting. I think this misunderstanding stems from the misconception that introverts are about shyness rather than energy management. Here's some really cool stuff though. Introverts can be excellent leaders. In fact, although there are some studies that say it's as little as 40% of the world's executives are introverts, The C-Suite Network found that 70% of CEOs describe themselves as introverts. So I think this is all about how it's measured. And I find this extraordinary because there's a bias against introverts in the workplace, but some of the top leaders in the world are introverts. Studies by Adam Grant found that introverted leaders perform significantly better than extroverted leaders, especially when leading proactive teams. Great CEOs and leaders who are introverts, we often think of men, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, but there are great women too. The former dean of Harvard Law School, Martha Minow, former First Lady, Laura Bush, the former Yahoo CEO, Marissa Mayer, are all extraordinary leaders who were also introverts. Introversion brings focus on substance over style. We excel at deep thinking and reflection, leading to well-considered ideas and solutions. But we do have a bias against us. That stat I gave you earlier, that 65% of executives believe introversion is a blocker. What we're actually talking about is 65% of executives think shyness is a blocker. And I would agree with that. What we need to do is step away from shyness and lean into our high quality input to be thoughtful, insightful, impactful, making those high quality contributions. It's not about seeking the limelight. It's about concentrating on the substance of what we do. When we do this, we can shine in the spotlight. I think one of the things I had to do was get comfortable with being in the limelight. As a CEO today, I am absolutely in the limelight. I have this podcast. People know me who I've never met. They think they know me anyway. If you're one of those, hi. I really value you being here, by the way. It's so wonderful to me when I meet somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, I've listened to all your episodes and I just feel like I know you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. I had to get really comfortable with that. It started with my work with women in high performance computing that I founded in 2013. And I was flying around the world to talk about it, the work we did. And I was the face and the voice of that movement. It wasn't deliberate. I didn't choose that. But I realized if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, if I wanted to have the impact I was trying to achieve, it required my face and my voice. I was the one talking about it. For a long time, I was the only one talking about it. And I stopped being shy because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about putting a spotlight on a problem. It was about saying, this needs attention. It was encouraging those around me as I grew the organization to take initiative and feel value for their contributions by shining a spotlight on what we were doing as a company, as an organization. Today, that's exactly what I do as CEO and head coach. I'm shining a spotlight on what we do. Not for my own value. Don't get me wrong. It's important I do something that is valuable to me, but because the world needs this. I truly believe the world needs more women in senior tech leadership positions. So we have better technology companies that don't burn people out, that are run better, that are more sustainable and build better technology for the human race. I do this because I need to. And that allows me to step away from my shyness. It means I will speak up. It means my team have morale and cohesion because I am promoting what we do and we have recognition for it. We have success because of it. But it's not about me. Doing this leads to your entire team being more cohesive, more satisfaction, better performance, simply because you are speaking up with what really matters. So even if you're naturally shy, try and figure out what matters and what difference you can make by being the one that speaks up. You don't have to do what I do and get on stage in front of 10,000 people. You don't have to do that at all. Definitely don't need to have a podcast. But what I want you to think about is, where do you lean into influence in your life? You probably do this in some aspect of your life, whether it's at home or at work. Where do you already do that and why? And how can you build that skill further? When you can deliver that high quality engagement, because you've got high quality work underpinning it, you're building a reputation as reliable, competent, passionate, good at what you do. But if you have that tendency to keep your head down and just deliver, people will stop seeing your great work. Simply doing is not sufficient. As I talked about last time, companies sometimes lay off the best teams because you just keep your head down and they don't see what you're doing. I see so many of us struggle with this. The good news is that sharing your achievements doesn't have to be an awful experience. It can be as simple as sharing every week with your boss in your weekly one-on-one or an update email what has been accomplished instead of assuming they notice. I think you should have a template every week for a weekly email to your boss, which is like, here's what we've been working on this week. These are things we haven't moved forward. And just simply, here's what we've worked on this week should include accomplishments. They will appreciate the update. It isn't bragging. I actually have to constantly remind my team, like, I want to know what you finished. I need to know for my own mental health. They just quietly finish stuff. And this really strikes me. Like, I teach this stuff. And yet I still have to remind my team all the time, tell me what you finished. I need to know it's sorted for my mental health as CEO. And I run a company which is all about doing this every day. So that speaks volumes to me that it's really not normal for so many of us to say, hey, I did this thing, right? I just want to know. So have a weekly update email that shows what you've completed. It isn't bragging. It is something your leader will really appreciate, believe me. Share your knowledge and expertise generously is another piece here. Position yourself as a go-to resource. Your high quality work means you know a lot. You might not think you do, but you probably do. And it can help so many people. One of the things I found remarkable about myself when I embraced it was how I can offer ideas and insights in things I don't know anything about. This sounds very arrogant. But I would often say things to people in a one-on-one setting when I'm comfortable. I'd be like, well, have you thought of X? Me thinking, isn't that obvious? And I don't really know what you're doing. And they're like, no, that's interesting. Can we talk about that a little bit more? So we'd have a longer discussion. And it would be eye-opening to them. It's landed me jobs. Like that approach is why I totally advocate for it in networking, because that approach of offering what I think is the obvious has landed me jobs. Because I think so deeply, that's my only explanation. I'm comfortable sharing something that I'm like, just, an obvious thing to consider here. But I have to do this on my terms. I have to be comfortable speaking up. And I'm far less comfortable in a big room. I have to work really hard to speak up in a big room. If you aren't comfortable speaking up in a meeting, reach out afterwards with your idea. But avoid starting that email with, sorry if this is not useful. Just state your idea and move on. I'm still a work in progress on that one. I still like to apologize when I'm like, this might be a stupid idea, but because I honestly sometimes think, I can't believe you haven't thought of this. Show dedication, integrity, and a strong work ethic by the way you show up as an introvert. This can really inspire people. If you are consistent, you will get a reputation for this. Be the person who delivers because you are an introvert, because you take time for yourself, because you need time to tackle anything that is hard and challenging. But be aware of the tendency to overpromise. If you don't know how to say no, and being an introvert, I think goes hand in hand with being a people pleaser. It's just not always true. But I think a people pleaser and introvert really do go quite strongly together. We don't like friction with others, so we people please, which can lead to overpromising. Extroverts people please too, but I think that fear of the negativity that comes back is more powerful to an introvert. The fear is more debilitating. And so we are more likely to people please. Again, if you're an extrovert and you people please, like it doesn't mean you're an introvert. It just means you've got that tendency too. But and avoid being the person who says yes or no based on your people pleasing rather than what you actually have the time to do. Deliver the reputation of somebody who says yes to things they can actually provide. Because remember, I think one of the things that we need to talk more about is the cost of overpromising. Overpromising has two outcomes. Failure to deliver, which means we aren't going to have the influence we want to be demonstrating, or you overwork and burn out from the stress. Often we start with the overwork, but inevitably we end up in the failure end of the spectrum. Learn how to say no and lead by example for your team. Focusing on sharing results demonstrates your effectiveness. When you are saying no, say no to the things that don't matter. Then lead by example and demonstrate how to say no in front of your team. Talk through how you prioritize and why, and help them do the same. This is where the introvert in you needs to coach your team. You need to speak up with your team. Share your thinking with peers when they are pushing back. Always focus it on business alignment. This is something that we need to talk about more. As you become a leader, your peers don't do what you do. They aren't going to understand you pushing back unless you can explain it from a strategic understanding that they have. Focus it on business alignment. And most of the time they will understand, even if they don't like your decision. This gives you incredible influence in an organization because they see you focus on the company, not on you. A lot of the time when we push back, and we do it because we don't want to, it's very tentative, we aren't giving good reasons why we're pushing back. And that gets under people's skin, which means the people pleaser in us goes, oh no, I've upset them. And we backtrack, or we don't do it again in the future. Instead, track and communicate why you're doing things. Communicate your successes, highlighting the business alignment, and communicate the things you're saying no to, highlighting business alignment. Your contributions to the company will benefit, and your reputation will too. And make sure you do the obvious. Actively listen. As I said in the previous episode, I had to learn how to actively listen. Now, as an introvert who is a coach, it is one of my superpowers. It actually came really easily to me, but I don't think most people actively listen. I include quiet leaders in that. Quiet leaders, as we talked about last time, can spend a lot of time in their own heads, which means we aren't necessarily actively listening. Now, if you're quiet or introverted, learning how to actively listen is very easy. Showing empathy and support for others' perspectives and challenges is a natural result of active listening. But you have to be able to dial that in. It doesn't come automatically. You need to make sure that there is space in your life for the active listening. Offer help and guidance when needed because you're actively listening. Then there's also delegation. When you actively listen, you may be better able to encourage and empower others, and therefore delegate more to them. Pat, one of my clients, came to me struggling with her recognition. Her influence at the company that she was in, she was consistently delivering high work, but as an introvert, she wasn't asserting herself in meetings or sharing her achievements. She was fine in one-on-ones, but she was being told she didn't have influence, and she was being told she didn't have executive presence. And really what it was is she was great in the one-on-one setting, but she would show up to meetings and she wouldn't speak up because she wouldn't feel authentic in herself. So what we did is worked on her visibility to superiors. We worked on those weekly updates I talked about earlier, and she just sent an email that highlighted what her team was doing. She did that not just to her boss, but actually to her peers as well. I'm a huge advocate of that. I get a lot of my executives to do this. Send 3 types of emails, one up to your boss, one sideways and one downwards. They're very similar in content. They aren't identical in content. You need to be mindful of who needs to know what and also the language used. But it's such a powerful thing. So immediately she got some more visibility through not being in meetings, but by sending an email. Now, her shyness that she did have meant she really didn't want to send it. But we got over that. We got some feedback, tweaked the process. And suddenly everybody was really appreciating it. And so she's like, okay, I should be doing this. It included detailed accomplishments and progress updates. So she began sending this every week. Her boss could see tangible results. Her peers could see the alignment. And she also therefore had more space because of writing this to offer ideas and solutions, positioning herself as a go-to resource within the organization. Then we worked on her discomfort with speaking up in meetings. What we started to do first of all was build her confidence with one-on-ones. So we got her to reach out to peers, share her ideas, taught her to stop apologizing in the one-on-ones. That was the first step. We built her confidence around that first. Baby steps. I'm a big believer in one thing at a time. Right? What she immediately started doing was demonstrating her dedication and integrity because she had an amazingly strong work ethic. She was so focused on delivering what she promised. And when we brought in learning to say no, to things that didn't align with the company's priorities, her peers began to understand it because she was able to explain why she was saying no better. And because she was doing this in one-on-ones, it was less daunting to her. And they immediately, all of her peers and her bosses, and I think also her skip boss, started to respect her more in the one-on-one capacity, which meant when she got into a room, those people already had an innate respect for her. Her strategic focus on delivering, and alignment with the business goals meant she had, at this point, amazing informal power and influence. This actually happened really quickly because she was already doing the hard work of delivering. It was more just communicating this and getting that influence in place. So what we did at that point was we had increased visibility. She was sharing her expertise informally in the one-on-ones. She was leading by example with her team, delivering results and fostering relationships. The final thing was to step up in the meetings. And this was the bit that was really out of her comfort zone. But we gave her frameworks for thinking on her feet. I'm a big believer you can learn to think on your feet. I have a whole think on your feet formula, which is great for those of us who really struggle with our internal dialogue. You can train yourself to think on your feet using this formula. It's worked with every single person I've used it with. And from there, we're able to then get the uncomfortable action of speaking up. And the cool thing is she didn't need to speak up very much, because when she did, she had so much informal influence because of her one-on-one conversations. People listened, proving that quiet leadership can be incredibly powerful. And the introvert in her could be comfortable 99% of the time. And that 1% made all the difference and was the cherry on the ice cream for what meant that she had influence in the organization. So this wasn't really about her executive presence, even though that's the feedback she was getting. This was her stepping into, how can I excel in my natural introverted leadership? One of the things that was highlighted in that story I just shared with you is networking. We've discussed previously the significance of networking, and it remains critical. Networking is the toolkit to your success, along with sponsorship, mentorship. The more you do it, the more open doors you're going to get. Now, what I talked about with Pat's story was networking internally. But networking is not just a task for internal, and it's definitely not something you do just when you need a job. It should be all the time in a continuous process. And again, I struggle with this. My job today involves a lot of networking, and I have a recipe for it. I want you networking all the time, little and often. It's a muscle you can train. I speak from experience here. Just make sure you don't exhaust it. Don't burn it out. And this is the danger of waiting until you absolutely need it, because you're going to burn out from the networking if you're an introvert. If instead, networking is part of your regular routine, you just have standard things you reach out to people with, and then you get on a conversation with them, you're going to build great relationships gradually and more comfortably. Use one-on-one networking opportunities to your advantage. I love the fact that it is socially acceptable today to reach out to people on LinkedIn and organize a virtual coffee. I don't have to go to a big networking event, which is my idea of hell. Ask for introductions from every person you meet. This is great. I always say to people, is there anybody I can introduce you to? And hey, is there anybody you think I should be meeting? Or would you introduce me to X? You won't get every single person doing it, but the majority of people will. And this method means that you aren't doing cold outreach. You are networking more manageably for us as introverts, because people are introducing you, and then you allow for more deeper, meaningful connections because you meet everybody. Always give more than you can take with networking. That, how can I help you? Is there anyone I can introduce you to? Is a way to give back. These are great questions that show your value in the relationship. And I think it builds so much goodwill, and a reputation is helpful and resourceful. And if you can do this, the community will be there to support you when you need it, to open doors for you, to recommend you. Pat's story that I shared with you a few moments ago about how she built her network internally really, to me, demonstrates the value of an informal network in your organization. She wasn't just networking with her peers, she was just networking with everybody she could meet, but on that one-on-one level that leveraged her natural strengths of making great connections in the small group setting or the one-on-one setting. When you can increase your visibility this way, sharing expertise, leading by example, delivering results, you are going to build strong relationships. And Pat did exactly that, proving that quiet, introverted leadership can be incredibly powerful. When you adopt a consistent, thoughtful approach to networking, we get to build robust support systems that aids our professional growth and success. This isn't something that we can't have as introverts. It's something that we just approach differently. And I would say my network today is one of my biggest assets. I want you to remember that as an introvert, you have an extraordinary capacity. If you're an extrovert, you do too. And I want you to recognize the introverts around you as being as extraordinary as you are. Introverted leaders can harness so many natural strengths. It isn't something that's going to hold you back. It is something that's giving you power and influence. But I want you to lean into it. When you do this, you will produce amazing, high quality work. You're going to show that quiet leaders can thrive. You're going to deliver consistent, tangible results. You're going to build a great network and strong relationships. You will have an amazing impact, proving that leadership does not require an extrovert, but can be the nice, quiet voice with an amazing presence who is an introvert. I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on who you are. What today has resonated with you? What insights do you need to start embracing? If you're an introvert, what resonates? If you're an extrovert, what do you need to learn about those around you and be more sympathetic towards? All of us are unique. All of us have a unique approach that is an asset, that is our superpower. And I want you to identify where it's a strength and use it to create meaningful connections, to create amazing impact, drive positive change. And then identify where it's also a weakness, but without lots of self-doubt or recriminations, and instead say, where do I need to just counterbalance this with a few other tactics? But then, like my networking example, find the tactics that work for you. Just because networking is a thing doesn't mean you have to get in a room full of 100 people. Find a tactic that works for you, that is less costly to your natural style, and you will shine doing that. Don't be like the 100 other people around you. Find your own way. Realize you've got a gap and then figure out how to do it yourself. I would love to continue this conversation with you. If you know you've got some areas to develop, come and have a chat with me. Head over to the show notes and you'll find a link to book a call with me or my team. And we'd love to get you started on embracing your natural leadership style, leaning into your superpowers, and being the leader who thrives because of who she is, rather than who she's not. Until next time, remember, stay on your tech leadership game and follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.